cash, money, dinero. We're going to be talking about cash today. Welcome to another segment of Tayde Ratón. Stay tuned. How are you, my friend? Welcome.
Thank you, Tayde. I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm doing great. Excited for another episode of Tayde Ratón and excited about the topic today.
All right. Well, I wanted to try to pull out of you a personal story that I thought was really touching. And I don't think it meant to be touching, but I want to dig deep into this personal story of yours that you told me several years ago. And that is when you went on your first vacation with your wife. I don't know if she was your wife at the time, to Puerto Vallarta, and sort of the cultural differences between you and your wife when she noticed how you were behaving with cash in Puerto Vallarta. So, can you give us the background and the context for that particular trip?
No, for sure. Well, just so the audience know, my wife and I met in Ixtapa long time ago. I was 18, she was 16 years old. And, after that, we stayed in touch through letters because there wasn't any email at that time. Or if there was, we were not using it. And we stayed in touch. And then, we kind of like figured out that it was about time for us to meet again. And we decided to go to Puerto Vallarta. So she flew to Guadalajara. I picked her up there. And then we went to Puerto Vallarta. And of course, she had, credit cards, debit cards, whatever. And I just had a pocket full of cash for the vacation. I paid the hotel in advance because, in Mexico, the all-inclusive is very common. So I paid that before we got to the hotel. And then throughout those days, I was just had a pocket full of cash for the days that we spent in Vallarta.
So let's dig a little bit deeper into that. So something must have happened in your childhood in Morelia that trained you for that moment, that you either trained you or didn't train you for what the world was like for her, which was more credit card based, and what the world was like for you, which was more cash based. Can you tell us what happened in childhood that made you that way?
Well, in Mexico, it's a very cash-driven economy, and it has changed. Over the last 15 years, it has changed a lot. I see more of my friends are having not just like the debit card, like the bank account, but actually applying for credit cards and stuff. So I think it has changed. But in when I was growing up, I don't, to be honest with you, I don't remember seeing my father with a debit card or plastic ever. So it was just like cash, So I grew up watching my parents paying everything in cash. My mom, I think my mom had bank accounts and stuff, but she was like more of the entrepreneurial side of the equation in our family. But I grew up in a family like where all the transactions were conducted in cash, and I used to work in the summer times with my parents. I mean, with my grandparents in Ixtapa. During the summertime, every holiday I will go and visit them because I love the beach and I love spending time with them. And my grandpa owned a movie theater, and everyone was paying with cash. I will work for him, and he will pay me with cash. So I will just come back from Cihuatanejo to Morelia again with a bag full of cash, and I will just stash it literally like under my mattress but that's part of it. But I had like a little drawer where I would just put all my money, and I have bills and all kinds of denominations. So whenever I would go out, I would just grab cash from there and go out. Even when I was like, and this is before I was in my second semester of my university. So all those years before that, it was nothing but cash.
So they actually call that mattress money, right? But
Yeah.
mattress money means something different in the United States than what it means in Mexico.
And don't forget about the catre money.
So in the United States, when you have mattress money, it's because for really one of two reasons. The first is because you don't have a lot of money. You don't have there's usually an amount that's sort of the limit before you start to say, why do I have so much money under my mattress?
Mm-hmm.
And typically you never reach that amount, and so you always maintain a little bit of mattress money. Secondarily, it's because you don't have trust in the financial system, and you think that the financial system isn't set up for you. So let's bust some of those myths, because I think with what you're saying, people that aren't familiar with Cihuatanejo, and definitely people that aren't familiar with Morelia, are going to think that you might have lived in an rural environment,
Oh
as
yeah.
opposed to, you were in an urban environment. You weren't living on a rancho somewhere. So did you not have trust in the financial system? Did you not think that it was for you?
No, I never thought about it. I never thought about it, and like I said, I know that my mom, at least, she will handle all the finances in our home, and she had a bank account. But like I said, like I never saw my father carrying debit cards or credit cards until later. Like I was older when I can see some flashes in my head of him paying with a card, but I never, not even once, I thought that, oh, my money is not safe at the financial institution. Never. It was just like I said, like how I grew up and how I was making my money. Like I grew, like my first jobs, I never got a paycheck. So it was just like cash. I was getting paid by cash, working for my family growing up. When I was a young kid, I was 7 years old when my grandma, she lived probably like 4 or 5 blocks away from a local supermarket in Cihuatanejo. Like the mercados, Sergio. And she will ask me like, "Oh, I run out of oranges. Go to the market and get me some oranges." And she will give me like 5 pesos. Just to give you an example. So I will come back and she will give me like a coin, a 5 pesos coin, so I could like start saving that money. So that's how I grew up. Like I said, every holiday I will work for my grandparents, and they will pay me for doing all kinds of chores throughout the day. And just until, like I said, I was in my second year of my university years, and I was still have cash. I think I opened my first bank account when I was like 19, 20, I think.
Okay, and so let's do a little timeline for the audience, because um, opening up your first bank account, usually children open up a savings account. Then when they start to have a lot of transactions, they open up a checking account. And then I would argue, I don't have the figures in front of me, but I would argue that that's really the maximum amount of accounts that the normal Latino in the United States ever really owns.
Mm-hmm.
A checking account and a savings account. However, there are thousands more types of products and services that you can get from a financial institution. And there's a reason why I'm bringing all this up today in our talk about cash. And also it's going to relay back to what we were talking about with the crowdfunding changes that happened on Monday,
Mm-hmm.
the 15th, which is that they increased the amount of crowdfunding that entrepreneurs were able to do up to 5 million.
Mm-hmm.
So that was unaccredited investors would be able to invest into startups up to 5 million
Amen.
before regulations started happening. So let's go back to your timeline, Tayde. You know, there it from where you are now in 2021 and when you opened your first account in when you were 20 years old, let's call it. Um, Give us the time frame and the timeline for how things have changed in your touchstones to the financial institutions.
No, I mean, definitely has changed. And I think you and I talk about it a few times in the past. I think like the biggest influence in that regard has been my wife because of how she grew up and everything that she was exposed to, like growing up here in the States and coming from an American family. So my perception of money is different to the one that I had before I moved to the States. And not in terms of like how you use it to acquire material things or pay for stuff or whatever, but like how you can manage it to actually make that money to work for you, and not just for your business but also for like planning for your future, your retirement and all that. I never thought about that kind of stuff growing up, and I don't think my parents thought about it. Not even my grandparents thought about that either. So I think it's a cultural thing that it was definitely like a shock for me to 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 start understanding the importance of um, looking at money as an asset that you can use it strategically for different purposes in your life, professionally and personally. And like I said, it has had to do a lot with what I have learned from my wife. And of course, now in the role that I'm in, I've been exposed to a lot of wealth management, financial advisors, etc., that are members of the association, and they have given webinars, seminars, etc., uh, to our members. And I have had the opportunity to learn, and I'm still learning because I think that there are, just like you said, there are many different ways that you can invest your money. And even to this point, my wife and I, as you start um, like growing financially, or your interests start changing and stuff, then you start considering other types of investment for the near future and for the future.
Okay, so the reason why I'm bringing all of this up is because there's a money management firm here in Los Angeles. I don't know if they're headquartered in Los Angeles, but the representatives that I know are in Los Angeles, and it's called Bernstein. And they issued a report last week that said that bank deposits have never, ever, ever, ever been higher, meaning there's never been more cash sitting in bank accounts in the United States than ever before.
Wow.
And the number that they gave was $11 trillion are just sitting in bank accounts. Okay. On top of that, there are what are called money market funds. And so typically, if anybody were to ever evolve past a savings account and a checking account, typically what it would be is the next product would be a certificate of deposit.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an example of a money market fund. There's no risk attached to them, but they don't make that much money for you. Usually, if you're lucky, you're going to be making about 2%. And with inflation, you're really losing 1%.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they say that is at $4.5 trillion. So close to $20 trillion in the United States is completely frozen in bank accounts, not doing anything. Well, that's a lie. The money market funds are doing something,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
but but it's not like compound returns or anything like
Yeah,
that. So that's an enormous amount of money that's just sitting in bank accounts. Okay.
it is. Yeah.
And so what I want to talk about today is something that has happened to me, and I want to relate it back to you, Tayde, which is I have a wife who comes from poverty. And so the number one thing that my wife is looking for in life is stability. There is nothing that you could throw at her that would change her perspective on what she's looking for in life is simply stability.
Mm.
And so because that's the case, and because I married her and I had to be understanding of that, whenever I make money, if I happen to throw it into my savings account, it's gone. Like I can never get that money out of the savings account. She wants it sitting there, what they call a rainy day fund.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
That's good.
And so, well, I don't think it's good. I
Well,
think it
no, I mean, it's good that you're saving.
And so what ends up happening if you're fortunate is you have $11 trillion in savings accounts or checkings accounts, and that money is not being utilized to grow at a compound rate.
Mm-hmm.
And so likewise, when entrepreneurs raise capital, there's typically one portion of the capital raised which is called the use of funds. Are you familiar with the use of funds, Tayde?
No.
So a use of funds is when you go to an investor and you say, I'm raising X amount of dollars. The number one question that they're going to ask you is, well, what are you going to do with it?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay. Uh-huh.
How are you going to spend that money?
That money, yeah.
And, in my experience, so I've been able to be a part of 40 investments in the angel round through the high net worth individuals that I scout for. We typically see that 25% of the funds that are raised goes toward administration, 25% goes towards technology, and 50% goes towards sales and marketing. That's a typical breakout of a use of funds.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when we do a use of funds on our personal lives, it's very different. Like, for example, like I've just admitted, the use of fund is zero because once it hits the savings account, I'm never allowed to touch it again.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that that's a smart use of our money on the family side, like on the personal side. But it also goes into what we were talking about with remittances, right? Like over $114 billion were sent in remittances in 1 year alone from the
Mm-hmm.
United States, Latin America, and the Caribbean.
Mm-hmm.
So that's money that is not compounding. It's money that's being transferred from one individual in the United States to another individual in Latin America, and they're using it on oranges and milk and electricity and all of the things that in Maslow's hierarchy of needs are the elemental things,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not compounding. And so going back to you, Tayde, what have you decided in your life is the way that you're going to compound money?
To be honest with you, my wife is like, she's so good with numbers, and you know that she's a financial brainiac. So in our situation, like my wife is in charge of all of our finances and our investments. I can tell you that, I mean, like I said, we're not like so informed like to take decisions on our own. So we have a wealth advisor that on a quarterly basis, and I mean we get reports from him monthly, but on a quarterly basis, we go over what we have, and then he recommends like how we should be moving our stuff. And Lisa, at the end of the day, is the ones who understands that the most. And I'm trying to. I've been starting to get a little more familiarized with what we have, but you know that I'm always busy with all of my stuff. So I try to just leave that to her, because I know that she's really good at it. And that's one thing I don't need to worry about it, because I know that our money is being taken care of, and our investments is being taken care of in a very responsible way.
But I would argue that at some point, you and your brothers decided that investments into a small business was a smart approach to trying to grow capital.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, you know that the company that we started, it has been self-funded by my brother Omar and I. So it's definitely. I mean, it's something that we have done because we believe in what we're doing, and but like in anything else in life, it has its pros and cons. Because then you thought, I mean, I have thought about it, like, all the money that I have invested into the company over the years. You always have options, and I could probably have invested that in like real estate or something else, and probably the I will have equity by now from that money that I invested. But when you're an entrepreneur, you are a risk taker. You don't think about that. Like, you follow your passion, and you do whatever it takes to make it happen. So in our situation, because we didn't want to have investors in the beginning, because of many different reasons, we decided to strap on and handle the financial growth of the company on our own, with the pros and cons that involved. Probably not the best way to do it, but it just happened that way, and here we are.
But then eventually you also did decide that real estate was an investment that you wanted to make, correct?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And so you have investments in small business, you have investments in real estate, you have savings accounts, you have checkings accounts, you have an advisor that will quarterly give you recommendations for what would be smart investments for your life stage, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have two children, and those two children require a certain amount of investment in different ways, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. For example, we have a college fund set up for both of them.
And so when you're advising entrepreneurs on raising capital, do you advise them on how much they should be raising?
No, I haven't. But now that I'm in the process of raising capital, um, I can tell. I mean, I can tell you that the number that we came out with is based on the cost of doing business and the time frame that we think is fair to get to the goals that we want to get to. So in our situation, we're raising capital, and we are raising an amount that I think is going to be enough for us to scale up the business in 18 months, with all the risks that involve. I mean, because nothing is for granted in life, but because of the stage that we're in, everything that I have learned, and like knowing how hard I work, and my understanding of the market that we are trying to serve, I think it's a pretty good shot of taking the company to the next level in 18 months with the amount that we're trying to raise. But in some situations, depending on the industry that you are in, if you are like a biotech company, you have to raise money, and you have to think about getting it back in like 5-10 years, depending on what you're working on. So it really depends on the product, the industry, the market that you're trying to serve. But it's definitely important that you run some numbers to have an idea of how much runway you have.
Thank you, Tayde. So What I tend to think about during capital raises is how you approach an investor, whether it be an unaccredited investor with no experience, like somebody typically in a friends and family round, in comparison to how you approach seasoned investors that probably know more than you about capital raises, right? I've introduced you to one family, the Gomez family, Eric and Raul, who are down there in San Diego and are a part of Tech Coast Angels.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's nothing that I could say to Raul that would be new to him, right?
Mm-hmm.
He could give me an education on investing and business, transcontinental business.
Mm-hmm.
He has a very successful company,
Yeah.
exporting and importing products to worldwide. Actually, I wouldn't even just say Latin America. So, if I go to Raul Gomez and I say, hey, I want you to invest in my company, I have to give some pretty good reasons for why he's going to take his cash and invest it in me, as opposed to reinvest it in his own company.
Correct.
Reinvest it in his children. He probably has grandchildren now. He has real estate. He's got all of these assets, and I'm coming to him and saying, typically an angel check is about $25,000. So I'm saying, I want you to take $25,000 of yours and invest it on me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's a really difficult conversation to have, right?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so, but
yeah.
Go ahead, Tayde.
No, I was gonna say that every time that you get money from a third party, that is a big responsibility, because and especially when you care about your brand and your reputation, and that you don't want to burn any bridges. You cannot just go out there, fundraise some money, and start BSing people that, oh yeah, I'm gonna give you this return, blah blah, because you know that there are some folks that are really good at sales, and they can convince you to give them the $25,000, but deeply inside of them, they know that they cannot deliver what they are saying. So that's why I've been like super careful with everything that I do and say, because I'm here, for the long run, and I'm not trying to get money out of someone without me feeling comfortable, like me believing in myself and my skills and what I have to pay that money back, because I don't like to owe money.
Right. So that's where we're at right now. Is there's a Twitter is a platform that is probably the most combative of all of the social media platforms, and there's a running dialogue happening on Twitter about friends and family rounds in the Latino community, right? Or even in BIPOC communities,
But
where they say, how can you one side of the argument is, how can you ask Latinos and BIPOC individuals for friends and family money when we have no friends and family money? Or on the other side, which is what I've been arguing, is there's $11 trillion that are sitting in bank accounts in the United States, and I guarantee you, I haven't seen the number, but some percentage of that, if they did accurate demographics, would be in Latino households, for sure, right? It's the number is not zero.
No. Mm-mm.
And so, it's really important for us to understand the power that we have in terms of our capital, both the capital that we send back to our native countries, and also the way that we manage our finances here in this country, so that our wealth is capable of compounding up until the point which you've mentioned in previous episodes, which is when you get to cumulative advantage and you're able to pass that advantage to your children.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that that was something that was really important that we should discuss today, Tayde.
No, definitely a very important topic, and probably in another episode we can talk about that generational wealth, because I think it's important in our community to understand that what we have to do so our children doesn't have to go through what we have gone through. There is no reason for our children to go through some of the same challenges and barriers that we have to knock down over the years, because we have that know-how that has to be transmitted to the younger generations. And not just that, it's not just the know-how, but also some wealth along the line so they can keep scaling it up.
Absolutely. And going back to the hashtag young female and furious, I was able to get another video. So I met this executive. Her name is Evelyn Ramirez-Schultz. I met her when she used to work at an organization that's called Para los Niños. And Tayde, I wish you could have been there with me when I toured Para los Niños. It was an idea of a new type of school that they built near to Skid Row in downtown Los Angeles. And it was like no school I had ever seen in my life. And I'm not going to do it justice to describe it to you, but what I will tell you is that when you entered the classroom, they had aromas. So the classroom that I entered, well, I think I entered all of them, but the one that I remember the most was an aroma of baking bread.
Oh, wow. That's
and
interesting.
So you would walk into the classroom and your senses would be activated. And they had sort of the scientific rationale for why that was important.
That's pretty cool. That's what they do in some of the clothing stores to motivate you for buying stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pretty cool.
And so we're human, right? So like it does affect us in some way. It affects me to this day, that I still remember.
Yeah.
That is the only classroom I've ever been in my life that had such a comforting aroma.
I know.
That I want to go back, right?
I know. Huh? We should put that in our offices.
For sure. So Evelyn was an executive at Para los Niños. She's no longer with Para los Niños. Now she's at a nonprofit that's called the Priority Center. But I showed her, both the video that Dr. Marla Parker did and the one that Rosario Torres did. And she did one for us.
Oh, nice.
I'll leave it for you to put it on to the back end of this dialogue.
Excellent. Thank you, Evelyn, for the video. We appreciate it. Thank you, Ratón.
I am young, female, and furious. Not because my driver's license says that I'm young, because it doesn't. Young to me is a state of mind. It means that I still have room to grow, to expand my mind, and to have bold ambition. It means that I have the courage to be in a boardroom with men who are older than me and not of my same background. It means that I deserve to have a seat at the table. It means fighting imposter syndrome. I am furious because I push my boundaries. I venture out of my comfort zone. I am young, female, and furious because I am a daughter of immigrants, and I choose to raise strong, furious girls who believe that there are no limits in what they can accomplish.